call. Got a lot of mail today. This came from Justin Johnson. Very nice, Justin. Thank you. So that helps old Pop Pop keep nice and dry and everything. Because old Pop Pop been leaking like an old Studebaker lately. So Noah Montano got me a package of pull-ups. So Noah or Noe Montano and Laura got me a package. So those are nice because in lean times it forces me to dry out used ones and reuse them, which is somewhat unpleasant without going too much into that. Handicapped people use a lot of disposables, and that's one reason that we're encouraged to off ourselves. That's where they got that commercial that they're running now that the old people look into the camera and they say, "I have lived a good life." And they're encouraging people to self-euthanize. But I don't feel that way. I feel mentally like a 29-year-old guy in a 70-year-old body. And I still contribute to society. You know, I still contribute to society. I try to help people. You know, I'm looking up this. Yeah, I'm looking up who sent what. So, and these were sent by if I can get them. These were sent by Katrina Jones. Overnight pads. Very important to help me not get bed sores. I can only hang for a couple of minutes because I got to take my blood pressure medicine. And that new blood pressure cuff is beautiful that Terry sent me the other day. It really works well. It's accurate. It's got a beautiful display. So I'm blessed. Man, Raj came by and he got me these beautiful oranges and paper towels. And he did a trip to McDonald's. He did a trip to McDonald's for me and got me 2 fillet of fish. And McDonald's did put, barely enough tartar sauce on the sandwiches. And like I said, they're $5 a piece. So I gotta tell uh, I got to tell Man Raj thank you. So, he never says anything to me. So, thanks again. Oops. And I sent him a little namaste. So, in Hindi, thank you very much is Bahat Dhanyavad. So, so I refer to him as my brother, which is absolute correct protocol. So the correct sentence for that would be Bahat Dhanyavad Bhai. Any language you want to learn, the way to start out, learning any language is please and thank you. That's the best place to start. You learn in Spanish or French or Hindi or anything like that, please and thank you. Unstoppable, how are you? I'm tolerable. Weather's nice. All right. I gotta take my blood pressure real quick. So Terry got me this beautiful blood pressure monitor. So that right there is the absolute window to take the medicine. You don't want it too high and you don't want it too low when you take the medicine. If you take your medicine, I'm not giving medical advice, but I have lived a long time taking care of myself. Hey, Justin. Justin, I just did a shout out and a thank you for the mattress pad that you sent me. So, so if you take your blood pressure medicine and your pressure is low, the body will actually work to pump that blood pressure back up because it needs a certain amount of pressure to get things done, and it will cause paradoxical hypertension. Paradoxical hypertension. So that's not good. Hey Google, cancel my. So, all right. So I got my medicine all lined up and ready to go. And I count the number of tablets in the bottle. That way you will never overdose. I write down the number of capsules left, because when you get older and you get forgetful, in this type of medicine, you absolutely can't take too much or too little of, because it's critical. And if you take too much, it makes your heart go way out of sync. So I learned from working in a nursing home that if a patient is bedridden, as long as you lay on your left side, you can eat and drink without choking, because the way that the body is structured. So if you're lying on your left side, you can safely eat or drink. And I'll tell you, young people who have a new baby, there are two things that they do wrong. They lean a baby way back to feed it its bottle. That's absolutely catastrophic, because that milk goes up into the eustachian tubes and into the ear canal and everything, and it causes what's called otitis media. So when you lay your baby back and you give the baby the bottle, some of that milk is going up into the eustachian tubes that dump into the sinuses and the throat. It's back feeding that milk into the baby's inner ear, and you're going to have a baby that has inner ear infections and all that. Now, the other thing, in my opinion, that people do wrong is they'll feed a baby and lay it on its stomach after feeding it. Now, you would think that would be the thing to do. But actually what that does is, if that baby burps up that food or throws up that food after you fed it and put it on its stomach, that food will flood right into the baby's lungs and asphyxiate that baby. And my personal opinion, hey Leanne, my personal opinion is that when people feed a baby and they put it down for nap after a feeding and they lay it on its stomach, that they've given that baby a potential death sentence. Because if that baby burps that stuff up, it's going to go right into the lungs. You have to figure the stomach like a lady's purse. And as long as you keep that purse right side up, nothing's going to spill out. But if you have the purse upside down or laying on its side, the contents are going to get spilled. Yeah, Leanne, YouTube has been kind of schizophrenic with me, where back when I had Welcome to Will's World, They said that my channel was going to be featured. And then Selena. I love Selena. And the lady that SHOT Selena is probably the most hated woman in the planet. I was devastated when Selena was got capped. But see, Selena trusted herself with people around her that she didn't really check on, because the other lady was stealing. The other lady was stealing her. Was stealing money that was coming from the fans. The fans were paying for fan stuff that you mail out, like coffee cups and T-shirts and stuff. And this lady was keeping the money. And then the fans would write and complain, "Hey, I sent my money, but I didn't get my T-shirt." So the thing collapsed on the lady. Selena, trying to deal with the lady, met her at a hotel, which is wrong. She should have just called the cops, because it was a lot of GUN and capped her. I even remember the room number. It was room 158. 158. When she sings a song, yeah, I know. I'm surprised that she didn't get capped while she was in prison. Every time I hear the song about the Chico in the apartamento, I think of that room. So yeah, I'm sure they did change the room number, you know. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they hated to have that notoriety for their hotel. That stuff happens, though. Well, the lady didn't get born again or anything, but she just out of the air says that she's forgiven herself. She needs to worry about whether God has forgiven her and whether she repented of what she did. But I watched one of her interviews, and see, they were very wrong giving that lady an interview, because they made her into a celebrity. And the lady said that she's forgiven herself. So, when she gets before God, she's going to have a nasty surprise. Because God wouldn't, hey, Wilma, God wouldn't be a God of justice if he didn't ultimately deal with these people who do all this horrible stuff to another person. Selena was like Dr. Martin Luther King. She knew something was on the horizon, because she said it's not the importance of the person, it's the things that they create that lives on. Yeah, I mean, the lady, if she gets on the outside, will actually be in more danger, because, like I said, she's pretty much the most hated woman on the face of the planet. So I'm logging my blood pressure medicine, because that's very important to keep you from overdosing. If you take blood pressure medicine and you don't write down when you take it and all that, you're just rolling the dice with your health. I write down how much I took, when I took it, and the efficacy. The efficacy is how long the effect of the. Okay, Leanne, back at you. How the efficacy is how long the medicine lasts, and that changes with your urine output and what you eat during the day and all of that. So I have days where the medicine lasts a good long time, and days where it doesn't. So a lot's going on in the news, and a lot is not being told to the American people. For my news, I go to Canadian Prepper. He's young, he's articulate, he's atheist, which saddens me because when he, by his own words, talks about the news and everything, he'll say, well, this stuff that's going on is biblical. Those are his exact words, but he doesn't put the two together. He totally just discounts the Bible, even though events like the Euphrates River drying up was talked about in the Bible thousands of years ago, and the odds of a major river drying up and then the armies marching across the Euphrates, I mean, that's very much more specific than Nostradamus ever was. So we have all of these earthquakes, we have all of these tornadoes. The last time they had one in my area, I was working at a car dealership, and I was sitting under all of these glass mirrors, these heavy glass mirrors that were in the showroom, and if they had fallen, they would have cut me to pieces. So at that time, I was still recovering from the accident I had had, and when the earthquake happened, I just rolled myself back into the closet, out from under the mirrors. And the boss man had a customer at his desk. He called out to me. He said, "What was that? What was that?" I said, "That was an earthquake." And he hopped up and he turned on the TV set in the showroom, and it mentioned the earthquake. He left the customer right at his desk, got up and he got on the phone. "I've just been in an earthquake," and went out to his car and took off. Left the customer just sitting there like, what the heck, man, don't bother about me. And the cool thing was the clock on the wall stopped when the earthquake happened, because I believe there's probably a strong magnetic field when an earthquake happens. And I never ever started the clock again. I always told people to leave it alone, to leave it at the time the earthquake hit. And I left the clock crooked on the wall. I straightened everything else back up, but I left the clock crooked. A time that's called birth pangs. Pangs or pains, right before the 7-year tribulation. So, and these knuckleheaded people in April are going to have a Satan fest, in Boston. So that's a mess. That's a mess. So this news that's on the air right now, it's just pablum that they're feeding to the American public. Other countries are all are all getting their bunkers restored, and they're putting anti-aircraft GUNS on top of their buildings in the Bear Country, you know, and they're talking about a first strike on the Iron Eagle country. That's us, and all this other stuff. But our government's not telling us to get ready or to prepare at all. They're still chasing after 45 and all of this stuff that does nobody any good. The thing about the deal with Trump is a germaphobe. And there's no way on God's green earth that Trump ever had a fling with the porno star, considering all of the ding dongs that she's imbibed. There's no way that Donald Trump would ever kiss on somebody like that or have intimate relations with that. All right, Wilma, good night. I keep forgetting that on the other side of the world, it's nighttime. So the weather here is about 50 degrees. But there's no way that Donald Trump ever had anything going with that girl. So when I was a kid, when I was 14, I went to work full time in the gas station. Yeah. 1814 in the UK. Well, 1814 would only be 6 p.m. in the evening. So my mother was an Egyptologist. She was very pro-Britain. And right after World War II, my father drove this very evil-looking with the split window in the back. It was gunmetal gray, and he had the evil circular glasses. And I wore lederhosen when I was a kid, the leather shorts with the strap. So I looked like a Hitler Youth. And my mother drove a Prefect. A Prefect was a British Ford that was very popular in Britain and not so much in America. But my mother insisted on a British car, and then she got a Triumph Herald, a 62 Triumph Herald, 48 horsepower motor, 48 horsepower, and it held 4 gallons of petrol, and it had a 2-gallon reserve. So if you flip this little switch, the tank would hold 6 gallons of petrol, and it cost $1.25. It cost $1.25 to put 6 gallons of premium in this Triumph. Now, my father had a sports car that cost $7,400 in 1967. Worst argument my parents ever had. My mother actually knocked our dinner onto the floor when my father brought the car home. And I had the audacity as one of the little children to want to press past my father to look at the car uninvited. So what he did was he took his cigarette and he took a big draw on the cigarette, got it nice and red, and he took his finger and lifted up my shirt and touched the cigarette to my belly. I still have the mark where the ashes went into the skin. I still have the mark, and I remember Buck using me as an ashtray because I had the audacity to try and press everybody, to try and press past everybody and look at the new sports car. It was a Ambassador Diplomat with two 4 barrels, knockoff wire wheels, and a 390 V8 that American Motors made before they were called American Motors. Most beautiful car I've ever seen. And it had a satin, my father called it a petticoat, a satin aluminum petticoat, built-in fog lights on the front grille, wire wheels, air conditioning, which was very rare in 1967, AM/FM radio, which was very rare, and the radio went up and down. It didn't go sideways, and it had personal air conditioning for the driver, and cigarette smoking was very important back then, and it had a cigarette lighter right at the top of the dashboard. So sitting next to my father like a puppy dog, we were going along one day, and my father whipped out a cigarette. So I pushed in the cigarette lighter. My father always held his hand over the lighter. He didn't know I had pushed it in. So when that lighter lit up and got red hot, it popped out of the socket, and it popped right in between my father's legs, right into his crotch, where his private parts were. And he almost wrecked the car. And he closed his legs to keep it from burning the seat. So he was like, nah. Biggest size they have, 6X. On the list, for some reason, it always takes away the specialty part, and it goes back to just the basic commercial. I don't know why it does that, because when I clicked on it, I clicked 6X. But in any case, I never heard the end of that. And my father almost wrecked his precious car. And yeah, whenever you do one of those lists, they don't put the special notes in when it forwards it into your registry for some reason. And this car had the advantage of self-adjusting brakes. You'd back the car up real fast and slam the brakes on. So every week my father would back the car up, slam the brakes on to keep them tight. And long story short was, he burned the brakes out because he kept them so tight. He burned the brakes out on the car way ahead of what they should have lasted. So we used to do these outings for Marriott Corporation for their family and their managers, for the upper echelon in Marriott. And I did the soda fountain. My father was the master of ceremonies. And once a year, Marriott would have all of these wonderful toys delivered to our house and stored in the basement. And our house looked like a store with toy pianos and dolls and all kind of wonderful, exciting toys that we were told, a death penalty if we touched them. And so we would load up the car and drive out to Haymarket, Virginia, to the Marriott Pavilion in order to give out the toys and to have me give out the soda pop and all that. And they had Pappy Parker fried chicken and wonderful little ice cream cups, and Ranger Hal was the celebrity. And a lot happened. A lot happened. Like one time, Mr. Marriott Sr. told my father to follow him, and he had a brand new Jeep. And so what he did was, instead of taking the road to the pavilion, he cut through the grass. And my father was right behind him in the Rambler. And my mother was terrified because she's like, Buck, if we hit a stump or something, you're going to rip the bottom out of your new car. And she worried about that car all the time because, like I said, in 1967, he had spent the equivalent of like $70,000 on this car. And they constantly argued about it. And the car's name was Princess. And Princess hated my mother and hated me. It loved my father. But my mother went to put the electric window down. All she did was she touched the button. The window dropped into the door and wouldn't come back up. So we spent the entire trip with the window down, blowing cold air on everybody. And my father, excoriating my poor mother about the fact that she would dare to touch the button for the electric window when she wasn't qualified to operate it, And I got to move Princess into the driveway to wash her under penalty of death. So I got used to driving the car the 50 feet to back it up and pull in the driveway and wash the blasted thing. And I was washing thoroughly behind the bumper, and manufactured back then wasn't what it is now. It's very crude. And the bumper was sharp as a razor, and it cut all across my fingers, almost took my fingers off. And that was Princess's way of telling me to mind my business. But that car hated me and it hated my mother. And my father had over-tightened the brakes. So when we came off the mountain from Haymarket, Virginia, in the dark, pitch black dark. And back then, folks, you got to figure, they didn't have street lights back then. They didn't have road markings. When you drove down a country road, sometimes you didn't even know if you were on the road because there was no paint strip or anything to tell you where you were in the road. And every so often you came pretty much head to head with another car because in the dark you couldn't tell how far to pull over with no paint strip. Very different driving conditions. And you figure the headlights were nothing near as powerful as they are now. So we're driving back from Haymarket, my father and I see the taillights in the dark constantly on. And my father was pumping the brakes. We were coming down the mountain with no brakes. No brakes at all on the car. So I told Buck to just shift the car into second and let the transmission do all the braking. But see, that would have torn his precious transmission up. So he was like, no, I'm just going to keep pumping the brakes and hope we don't go over a cliff and kill ourselves, you know, because I don't want to hurt Princess. But eventually, karma caught up with Princess, and my father did an unusual thing every day before going to work. Instead of just going around the block, he would go up to the top of the street and hang a U-turn and come back down to go to work. And when he went up the street and did the illegal U-turn in the middle of the street, a person came over the hill. Princess got hit right in the side and bent into a horseshoe. And that was the end of Princess. So my father always named his cars. I never got into that because it was like when you give something a name, it takes on that personality. And the next car he bought was a 69 AMC Gremlin, little teeny short thing. And it was green on green on green. My father loved a money green car. And I was like, Buck, why did you buy that car in money green? Nobody's going to think you have money driving that thing. And the weird thing about the Gremlin was it was a cut-off AMC Hornet. So in order to get any good traction, you had to keep the gas tank full because it was like driving half a car. And if you didn't have a full gas tank, the car was very unstable. And so they had a flood in Washington that year. And my father and I were going up Kensington Parkway on the lower end of the parkway. And there was like 2 or 3 feet of water. We were driving uphill against the water in Geraldine. And the car would not stall out because it sat very high up off the road, and it had a 6-cylinder with the spark plugs on top of the motor, nice and dry, where they wouldn't get wet and stall the car out. And man, that thing was indomitable in a flood. Nothing would stop it. Very cute little car. And then my father got serious after he got tormented and teased about driving this little car. And he got a Mercury X100 sports car, which was very grand. And back then in 1971, the cars were all metal. The hubcaps were metal, the grill was metal. And that was a very beautiful car, but man, it was a gas hog. And then the oil embargo hit, and you could only get 5 gallons of gas at a time. So this huge car was worthless because you couldn't even drive it far enough to get gas in it. And my father would have me get gas in a gas can and bring it home and dump it in the back of the car. But that's a whole different story. But I never was for naming cars names. And my father would go to the beach, and he always had a very powerful car. And my mother had her little 48 horsepower Triumph Herald. And my father would zip in and out of trucks and everything. And my mother was just white-knuckled trying to keep up with him in the little Triumph. I always went with my mother because I always figured that my father was going to hit a gas truck or something and, annihilate himself. And everybody in my father's car smoked. They all had the windows rolled up with the air conditioning on, and you couldn't even see into the car. There was so much smoke. And my mother and I always hated smoking. So I would go with my mother and take a chance on being wiped out in the little Triumph. But when my father took her car away, I gave her my Galaxie 500 with the police interceptor motor. And man, she was undaunting in that thing. We went down Twinbrook Parkway, and the Galaxie was just like begging to be let go. And she had the old people glasses on, and I was trying to show her how to drive the car because she was used to driving a clutch. And we're driving down Twinbrook Parkway, 28 miles an hour with the left turn signal on, you know, and these young kids go by and they go, "Get out of the way, bitch." And so when she heard them call her the B word, she was off to the races. And she was determined to catch up with the smart alecky boys in the Datsun B210. And when we got up to the light at 355, she let the Galaxie bump into the back of the Datsun. Now, nowadays, if you even bump into somebody, they're going to call the cops and you're going to have to trade information. Back then, it was a whole different world, you know. All the boys did was they looked up in the mirror and started cursing my mother out. And then my mother let the Galaxie start to push the little teeny Datsun because the Galaxie had these cattle car push things on the front that all the cop cars had, being an ex-cop car. But it was a detective's car. It was a detective's car like the one in the movies. It didn't have all of this, you know, dash drill marks and stuff where they put the shotgun in the radio. It was just like a normal car, except it was hugely powerful and it had the two big push things on the front. And she just let that Galaxie start to push the Datsun into the intersection. I told her, I said, "Mom, you know, even though you're 71, you can still go to jail." And man, those kids were looking up in the mirror and cussing her out. And when that light turned green, they were gone, man. And they didn't give her any more lip or any more problem. But I really said to myself, I gave her too much car. And my father was, yeah, she was a little old lady from Pasadena. And she got used to letting that 352 out. And then one day she came home, she was crying. And she was a very obese woman. She had her thyroid taken out. She went from being very svelte to being hugely obese. And she was crying, and I said, "Alice, what's wrong?" I never called, my parents weren't huggy kissy. So I never called them Mom and Dad. I called Dad Buck. I called Mom Alice. And there was no disrespect. We just didn't have the huggy kissy relationship. The night that my little boy got run over by her own car, I was at my mom and dad's. Ann called me to tell me that Timmy was dead. And I said, "How did it happen?" And she said, "Well, he got run over by our station wagon." I said, You're going to tell me our son got ran over by our car?" And I just collapsed in front of my parents. I said, Oh God, my boy is dead. Oh God, like that. And my parents never hugged me or said they were sorry for me or rubbed my back or anything. And I left my parents. I could never look at Ann after that. We never got married. We never got married after that. And she let my boy get run over twice. She left the car running, and the little brats that she was babysitting reached over the seat and put the car in drive, and the car came up and ran our boy over. She didn't realize he was under the car with the car sitting over top of him, so she walked out and put the car in reverse and ran him over the second time. So he was good and gone by then. And I never could face her, and tell her how upset I was with her carelessness. But she was 16 and I was 17. That was half a century ago. I know that I'll see him in heaven, and he'll come running up to me, and I'll see my father. My mother never got born again. When they talked to her about getting born again, my mother, very snooty, said, well, I've been born one time and that was enough. And after she said that, she passed away 2 weeks later, and then my father got born again. So my mother got moved out of the way. My father got born again, and he went being from my antagonist to being my best buddy and confidant and pal. And when it was his time to pass away, I was right there with him, patting his hand and telling him I loved him, which was very difficult at the time because he had never had a chance to see he was sorry for what he did to me, punching me in the face and knocking me down the basement stairs and putting a cigarette out on me and electrocuting me a few times, and all of his other little pranks that he thought was funny to do. He had been terribly abused when he was a child, and believe me, that stuff flowed downhill. But I was with him when he passed. It felt like a bunch of angels or something went right through me from the window and snatched him, and then went right through me back out the window. And when I went to visit his gravesite, I pulled up in the car. I was all snazzed up. I had a 3-piece suit, and I'm walking towards his grave, and this big old doo-doo flies right up my nose into my sinuses. So I'm going trying to get the fly out of my sinuses, and I get the fly into my mouth, and I'm standing at my father's grave. All of these people are watching me contort, and everything as I'm trying to get the fly out of my sinus and to where I can spit it out before it lays eggs in my brain. This one lady, a fly went up her nose and laid eggs, and the grubs ate her brain, and she wrecked her car and all that. And when they did the autopsy, they opened it up, and it was full of grubs squirming around where some fly had gone up her nose and laid a whole colony of little baby flies. And that's what I had on my mind. But when I went to spit the fly out, the people were looking at me. I didn't want them to think that I was spitting on my father's grave. So I ran back to the Lincoln and threw the door open and spat the fly into a coffee cup. and then rinse my mouth out real good, hoping not to catch anything. And then that was the last time that I ever went back to my father's gravesite. But he and I used to go to Fish Thompson's or O'Donnell's and have a nice fish dinner. And after he passed, it was weird. One day I went to O'Donnell's. I'm looking at my watch waiting for him. And then I said to myself, you idiot, he's gone. He's not ever coming back. And I was all wistful. You know, it spoiled my lunch. But I know I'll see him in heaven along with a whole bunch of friends and my son. So I'm excited. Listen, fam, I gotta go. I took my medicine and it's making me groggy. So I got to take a snooze for about an hour. I'll probably hook back up with y'all later on. Poppity Pops out.